So we are in year 10 of Rainbow Six Siege, and with next season, we will have the release of Siege X, which is the generational update coming to the base game, doing a ton of work to the engine, overhauling the audio, brand new graphics, a new game mode, so much more, and of course, the game is going to be free to play. And at its current point in time, it's pretty safe to say that the Rainbow Six IP is at one of its highest points of popularity. Well, yesterday on Twitter, there was a post made by someone which got some decent traction, where they said that they would have preferred if Ubisoft released R6 Patriots instead of ever doing Siege. And this sparked quite a big debate. Now, if you're not sure what R6 Patriots was, it was going to be the successor to Rainbow Six Vegas 2, keeping that same style of campaign-based missions, whilst most likely having its own multiplayer as well. This game would initially get announced, then eventually cancelled, and from its ashes, Rainbow Six Siege would then be announced, taking the franchise in a direction it has never been seen before as an online PvP, with no campaign and unique operatives with their own gadgets. Now, I believe that this was Ubisoft's greatest decision. Patriots probably would have been a good game, and as much as I like the formula that was introduced in Vegas and even the different formula of styles of Rainbow Six games before that, Siege happened at the perfect time, especially with the climate of the gaming community and the industry. Because you need to remember that Rainbow Six Siege was developed and released in the early to mid 2010s. By all means, Ubisoft were far ahead of the curve than other developers when it came to how the industry was going to be. Live service games, of course, have existed way before Siege and Overwatch, for example, which we're going to talk about in a second. But as you all may know, over the past decade, everyone and their nan are trying to make a live service game. I think one of the biggest ones that started this boom was Overwatch, which some people like to say that Siege is basically just a clone version of a military Overwatch, even though Rainbow Six Siege released before it. Not downplaying the success of Overwatch and its impact on gaming, but it would be very disingenuous to say that Siege copied it. Siege was also quite ahead of its time when it came to free content as well. For the past decade, Ubisoft have been releasing free operators, maps, and more every 3 months. Just to put that into perspective, when Call of Duty finally stopped doing paid DLC for its maps, Rainbow Six Siege was in its 4th year. Again, I feel like I do have to commend Ubisoft for that. But yes, Rainbow Six Siege did have a gameplay difference from the other Rainbow Six titles, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but a big complaint which a lot of people have had is its tonal shift, which at some points is beyond valid. I think we can all agree that a low point for the story was the Stadium arc, which we do have to note was at a different time with different creatives, different creative directors, different writers, where those who are working on the game just had a different direction for it. But nowadays, there has been a return to form. They used the weakest part of the story and made it make sense. They're doubling down on how Siege looks. They want it to look gritty again. Just look at Siege X, look at the new graphics. Even in Rainbow Six Mobile, they've done a full visual overhaul to make it look more like Rainbow Six, and we'll talk about mobile in a minute. But over the years, Ubisoft have putting in the efforts to make Siege go back to its roots of Rainbow Six, and I think they're doing a great job of it. But even through all of its low points, I still think Siege should have been made over Patriots, and that's for one big thing: the operators, the characters. We are in a very difficult period when it comes to media creation, especially for original content. People like brands they recognize. People like characters, and if new characters are introduced, they like them being linked to something they already know. Why do you think Marvel Rivals took off the way it did? I enjoy the game, don't get me wrong, but it's a blatant rip-off of Overwatch, and I don't use that term lightly. If the game released with all original characters, it probably wouldn't have gained any traction. But it's a recognizable brand. It's Marvel, so it's taken off the way it did. People are comfortable with those characters. And in the current day and age of the gaming industry, everyone's trying to make that next mascot, the next character which they can slap on everything. It's very volatile for IPs to stand out now. Games are more expensive to make, and it's just not how it used to be. So I genuinely do believe if Ubisoft did go forward with making Patriots back in the early 2010s, regardless of the quality of the game, and probably even regardless of how well it sold, the IP just wouldn't have the strength anymore due to how the industry is. And Rainbow Six as a franchise would probably dwindle just because it wouldn't be that next big thing. Does that suck? Yeah, it is rubbish, but it's how it is. But thanks to the operators in Rainbow Six Siege, Rainbow Six as a brand now has a large amount of brand recognition. Characters such as Ashe, Sledge, Tachanka, Jaeger are gaming icons now. All of these characters allow Ubisoft a bit of breathing room to experiment more with Rainbow Six, or even go back to its roots with new games. And I think the reason why this worked out in Ubisoft's favor is that they weren't going for these big mascots. They didn't create all the original operators when they made the game and think, okay, these are going to be people we can sell, these are going to be X, Y, and Z. Of course, they're still trying to sell a product at the end of the day, but they didn't design Tachanka in a certain way where he became this cult meme icon. They were just making a Russian turret operator. Whereas you look at Concord and they were trying so hard to push these characters as these next big charismas that they already had an episode lined up in that Amazon show, which released after they already shut down Concord. You can't artificially force a mascot like that. They have to be created by the community. And I think luckily Siege has kept that value even up to date. They never try and force a character to be that next big thing in gaming. And I believe that they still keep that value with all of their operators who they create. It comes down to if the community wants to embrace that character or not. They're not going to try and shoehorn it. I guess in some sense, Ubisoft did get quite lucky. That they managed to get recognizable characters to elevate the game's brand before that became the thing that every other game was trying to do. And I think because they were one of the first ones to do it in the modern gaming setting and also weren't forcing it is why it took off so well. You just wouldn't have that same level of brand strength if they went forward with Patriot, because Patriot, as good as it may have been, would have just been another game in the Rainbow Six franchise. Whereas now, Ubisoft are in a position to make more single player games, to make more games like Vegas or what Patriot would have been like, with that brand security in this very hostile gaming industry. And that's thanks to having these operators. These characters are stronger than the Rainbow Six name itself. And that isn't to insult the brand or any of the hard work that's been attributed to it. That's just how the current gaming ecosystem is. I mean, just look at some of the older characters they've brought back. Gerald Morris was in the older games, but unless you were a super diehard who remembered every single operator in that game who weren't vital to the plot, and by that I mean like just not Domingo Chavez, then his name never really carried much of a weight. But now that he's in Siege and they've made him deimos, to a lot of people, Gerald Morris is a bigger name than Domingo Chavez, which I do think is something that we can correct, and I would like to see Domingo Chavez appear at a point, maybe not in Siege, but in a title where we're springing off of Siege, we're using these characters to expand even more. But I just want to use that example to show how well Siege is at making these characters such strong brand icons and allowing Ubisoft to experiment and push more games in this hostile gaming industry. I think a good example of this is Rainbow Six Extraction. This game takes place in an alternate universe and poses the hypothetical question of what if the world's greatest counterterrorism unit went up against a threat not from this world. And although the game fell flat, and regardless of how much I actually personally enjoyed it, this was still a risk that Ubisoft took with this game, a risk that they wouldn't have been able to take if they didn't have the brand strength developed by Siege. Because in this game, you have the operators from Siege. They are one of the biggest parts of the marketing. And even if you don't like the sort of what if scenario with like Rainbow fighting aliens, and even if you didn't like the game, we still do have to give them credit that they did take the risk here, which, like I'm saying, is becoming very more rare in this current gaming climate. They've also developed Rainbow Six Mobile. It's not really fair to compare this to the same way with the risk they took for Extraction, because mobile is more of just a reimagining of Siege for mobile devices, which, just like Siege, has its characters and operators at its core. You've also got R6 Small, which is a Netflix game. I'm not going to diss it that much, because to me this game is clearly just a baby of contracts, and there was clearly a contract which required Ubisoft to make a Rainbow Six game for Netflix. It's actually decently fun. If you have a Netflix subscription, you can play it. It's a simple mobile game, but it's fun. But even with it deviating that far from the Rainbow Six brand, you still have brand recognition because of these operators. That's how strong they are. So now you'll probably be asking the question, well, if you've said that they've done that well with Siege, that you've got these operators allowing the brand to elevate to new heights, then why could we not have a game like Patriots now? And to that I say, that's a great question. I also want a single player game to be released now. I think now is the perfect time. You could take a handful of any of these operators and put them into a story campaign together. There's millions of different scenarios that can happen across them all, millions of different synergies. They've done an incredible job of humanizing each and every single one of them, and there is a lot to work with here. So although I may disagree that Patriots should have been made over Siege, we can agree that now is the time to make games like Patriots, to make games like Vegas, or even continue to do something new with a single player campaign. I think they did luck out with Siege, and they lucked out with the brand recognition the operators are given. I think they may be playing it a bit too safe recently after the failure of Extraction. I can't blame them, but I would like to see them take a risk again. Maybe in a bit more of a grounded approach. Let's keep it in, let's tie it to the main narrative, let's get a core story-based gameplay, maybe like Vegas or something along the lines of that, but with these operators front and center, but with that core Rainbow Six feel. So yeah, Rainbow Six Siege was important for the Rainbow Six IP. Every other IP is clamoring over itself to try and get that level of brand elevation in the modern gaming era. There has undeniably been highs and lows over the few years during this course, but in the grand scheme of things, this was the best case scenario for Ubisoft, and I am beyond excited to see where they take the Rainbow Six IP going forward. The future lies in these operators, not just from Siege, but from the older titles as well. And I do kind of find it quite poetic that the thing which has brought Rainbow Six to the forefront of this modern gaming era is the thing that also started it to begin with, and that is the stories and characters being told. Drop a like on this video if you did enjoy, subscribe if you're new, stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next one.